Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going back in time.
Ooh, time travel.
Well, you know what I mean. We're going back to 79 AD to a Roman town, Pompeii.
Pompeii, a place frozen in time, literally.
Yeah, by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, of course. But you know what's really fascinating to me is that Pompeii, it's like this window, you know,
Oh.
into the lives of everyday Romans. I mean, even the people whose stories don't usually get told, like enslaved people.
And that's what's so amazing about Pompeii. We get to see not just the emperors and the generals.
Right.
It's the ordinary people, their hopes,
Their dreams.
all of it preserved.
Yeah, and we're so lucky to have someone who can help us understand all of this. Elodie Harper, she's the author of the Wolf Den trilogy. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes, I love those books.
It's a historical fiction series set in Pompeii. And what Elodie does so well is she combines those, the archaeological findings with a novelist's imagination.
She really brings those people to life.
Exactly. And one of the things that she focuses on that I find so fascinating is how she goes beyond the grand villas and the beautiful artwork.
Right.
And she shines a light on the everyday lives of ordinary people, including enslaved people.
And one of the most important recent discoveries is these slave rooms that archaeologists are finding.
Slave rooms. Tell me more about those. I don't think I've heard about those.
So imagine, these cramped little rooms, often tucked away in the backs of houses or workshops. And this is where families or sometimes even groups of enslaved people actually lived.
Wow. So you have this the contrast. You have these confined quarters
Right.
right next to the luxury of the wealthy elite.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder of just how divided Roman society was.
Absolutely. And Elodie emphasizes the psychological impact of that.
Mhm.
Imagine living like that, always aware of the power dynamics at play.
Yeah. The constant reminder of your place in society. It must have been. It's hard to even imagine.
And that's one of the things that Elodie really explores in her novels. How did enslaved people maintain a sense of community and even, identity in such a dehumanizing system?
It's a really important question.
And archaeologists are actually trying to answer this through the research as well. And one of the most fascinating avenues is through graffiti, because the graffiti in Pompeii offers a direct line to the thoughts and feelings of everyone,
Ooh, the graffiti.
not just the wealthy,
Yeah.
everyone,
Right.
including enslaved people.
That's so cool. It's like we get this glimpse,
Yeah.
into their daily lives, their loves, their frustrations.
Even there's one inscription I find particularly poignant. It says, "Meth, the slave girl of Chimenia, loves Crestus."
Wow.
Just imagine finding that this testament to human connection, in the midst of this system that denied their very humanity.
It makes you realize that even in those times, those really difficult circumstances, people still found ways to connect with each other,
They found love.
to find solace. Yeah. But wait, didn't they find this inscription next to others that were basically saying, the master has the right to exploit their slaves?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It really highlights the complexities and contradictions of Roman society.
Right.
It was both this brutal system, but at the same time, there was this element of humanity there.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't black and white. There are these gray areas, and these are real people with complex lives trying to navigate a system that we can hardly even comprehend today.
And that's what makes Pompeii so captivating. It's not just the ruins themselves.
It's the people.
It's the people, their stories, the traces they left behind.
Speaking of traces, let's move on to some of the other incredible finds that are really helping us understand everyday life in Pompeii. The frescoes and artifact, they paint such a vivid picture of what life was like back then.
Yeah.
The food they ate,
The clothes they wore,
the jobs they did.
within their entertainment.
Yeah. Remember that fast food counter that they unearthed? The one with the amazing murals?
Oh, yeah.
So vibrant.
Yes, they were just as obsessed with convenience and visual appeal as we are today, maybe even more so.
Maybe more. They had such an eye for beauty.
And wasn't there a fresco that they found that showed a flatbread with toppings? I swear I read somewhere that people are saying it could be evidence of pizza in ancient Rome.
You know what? That's one theory.
That's pretty cool if you ask me. But, while we're on the topic of food for thought, let's shift gears a little bit to a discovery that really speaks to the ideas of status and power in Roman society. That ceremonial chariot they found outside Pompeii's walls.
That chariot, talk about a status symbol. It was like the Lamborghini of Roman road travel.
Yeah, seriously. But what I find even more fascinating than the bling is that the scenes depicted on the chariot, they include what appear to be depictions of sexual assault.
It's a stark reminder, that even in a society as advanced as Rome, there were still these deeply problematic norms and behaviors. Yeah. It's a conversation we need to be having, even if it's uncomfortable.
Mm.
But you know what? To contrast those depictions of power and dominance, let's talk about a woman who really defied the odds. Julia Felix. Have you heard of her?
Oh, yes. A fascinating woman.
She was the daughter of a freedman. So someone who had been enslaved but gained their freedom, and she ended up owning a massive leisure complex in Pompeii. A leisure complex. Can you imagine?
A true businesswoman.
And what's even more striking is that she managed to get permission to close off a road to expand her business.
She had to have serious connections and influence.
Right. It makes you think about how she was able to achieve all of this in a society that really limited women, especially someone from her background.
It challenges our assumptions about social mobility in ancient Rome.
Absolutely. Her story is so captivating and complex. But, we could get lost in the details of these individual lives. We have to remember that there's this massive event that brought Pompeii to its knees, the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD.
Of course. It's easy to get fixated on the destruction. But what about the aftermath?
Yeah.
What about those who survived?
The resilience of the survivors.
Exactly. Their experiences. How did they rebuild their lives after such a catastrophic event?
It's a perspective we often forget. We tend to focus on, the drama.
The big boom.
Yeah. But what about the long process of recovery and rebuilding?
And there's one detail that really highlights the scale of the relief effort after the eruption. Emperor Titus himself visited the disaster area.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And this wasn't just, a symbolic gesture.
Right.
It shows how important it was for the Roman government to respond to this crisis and help the survivors.
So there was this level of compassion.
Of course.
And organized relief efforts even back then.
Absolutely. And it's something that we often don't consider when we think about ancient civilizations.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm already starting to see Pompeii in a whole new light. It's not just this tragic ruin. It's this vibrant society frozen in time.
A time capsule.
Yeah, a time capsule.
And that's the beauty of it. It challenges our understanding of the past and forces us to confront the complexities of human nature.
Absolutely. And we're just getting started.
There's so much more to uncover. It's amazing how Pompeii can teach us so much, about a civilization just from this one moment. Frozen in time, like you said, it's more than just the buildings and stuff. It's about the people.
The people, yeah. And Elodie does such a good job at bringing those people to life. Like in her book, she talks about this gold bracelet.
Oh, yeah.
And it has an inscription. It says, "From the master to a slave girl."
I remember that.
And, at first glance, you might think, oh, that's, kind of a romantic gesture.
A gift.
Right. But Elodie points out that the reality was probably much more complicated. That inscription could be so many things. It could be a genuine expression of affection.
Or a way to control her.
Yeah. Or even a sign that, she was the master's favorite concubine. There's so much ambiguity there, and it makes you think about the power dynamics within those relationships. And, it's something that Elodie explores with her main character, Mara.
Yeah.
She gets a similar bracelet from her owner. And for her, it represents all these different things. Gratitude, resentment.
Longing for freedom.
Yeah. But, it's important to remember that the experiences of enslaved people in ancient Rome were really diverse. Like some people experienced horrible abuse and others, they formed bonds with their owners.
Right.
Some even achieved positions of authority within the household.
It's tough to think about, but it's an important part of understanding the nuances of Roman society.
It's complicated. And Elodie makes this point that even after gaining freedom, a lot of freed slaves, they ended up owning slaves themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like this cycle that kept repeating itself.
Yeah. And it shows just how deeply rooted slavery was in Roman culture.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that history isn't always, black and white.
There's so much gray area.
Exactly. We can't judge people in the past by our own standards today.
We have to try to understand their motivations and the pressures they were facing.
The context.
The context, yeah. And I think one of the best ways to get a feel for that context is through the graffiti in Pompeii.
The graffiti.
It's like having direct access to the unfiltered thoughts and feelings of the people who lived there, their hopes, their desires.
Like we're eavesdropping on them.
We are. And even the most mundane little scribbles, they tell us so much.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, we learn about their favorite gladiators, the bad wine they were complaining about, even their romantic
Your
entanglements.
gossip.
Yeah, makes you realize that even across, 2,000 years, we're not so different.
We still share those basic human experiences.
Exactly. But what's even more surprising is what the graffiti tells us about literacy in Pompeii.
Literacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it suggests that even the lower classes, many of them could read and write.
So it wasn't just the elite.
Not at all. It challenges the whole idea that literacy was this exclusive thing.
That's amazing.
It points to a much more vibrant and intellectually engaged society than we might have imagined.
So they were exchanging ideas.
Sharing information.
Wow. Speaking of vibrant imagery, I have to ask you about one of the discoveries that I found the most captivating. The House of the Golden Door.
Ooh, what a name.
Right. It sounds like something straight out of, a fantasy novel.
It does.
And the house itself is just as incredible as its name suggests. There's this massive garden fresco
Really?
that depicts a beast hunt.
Mm.
So dramatic.
Wow.
It's this incredible scene of beauty but also brutality.
The Romans had this complex relationship with nature, didn't they?
They did. They revered its power, but they also, exploited it for their own purposes.
That's a good way to put it.
And the House of the Golden Door is just one example of the artistry and craftsmanship that you find in these homes.
These elite homes.
Yeah. But even in these settings that are so opulent, you're reminded of the darker side of Roman society.
Right.
Like Elodie mentions that some of the erotic art that they found in Pompeii, it actually depicts scenes that we would consider sexual assault today.
It's a good reminder that even in a society like Rome, there were still these deeply problematic norms.
It's important to remember that. We have to confront those difficult aspects of history.
Absolutely. We can't shy away from them. And I think that's what I appreciate about Elodie's work. She doesn't try to sugarcoat things. She presents this nuanced picture of Roman society and lets the readers draw their own conclusions.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the everyday details of life to these bigger themes of, power and tragedy.
It's been quite a journey.
But I'm still curious about what happened to Pompeii after the eruption. Like, what happened to the survivors?
Right.
How did they rebuild their lives?
It's a great question, and actually, Elodie explores this in depth in her upcoming novel, The Temple of Fortuna.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And she makes the point that the aftermath of the eruption is just as important as the event itself.
That's interesting.
We tend to focus on the destruction, but the stories of resilience and recovery are just as compelling.
Yeah. Like, how do you recover from such a massive loss?
How do you find the strength to start over when everything you knew is gone?
That's a heavy question.
And we know that Emperor Titus actually visited the disaster area personally.
Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It demonstrated that the Roman government was committed to providing aid and helping the survivors.
So they actually put resources into rebuilding.
They did. And Elodie points out that this actually reveals a lot about Roman values and social structures.
How so?
Well, you see examples of both compassion and opportunism as people are trying to navigate this new reality.
So there's this mix of good and bad.
It's complex. But even in the face of such tragedy, there's always hope.
That's a good point. The potential for renewal. I'm really looking forward to reading Elodie's new book to see how she brings all these themes to life.
I think you'll really enjoy it. But before we wrap up our discussion of Pompeii, I think there's one more aspect we should touch upon, the site itself.
Oh, you mean like what happened to Pompeii in the centuries after the eruption?
Exactly. Because we've been talking about it like it's this, perfectly preserved time capsule.
Right.
But what happened once everyone was gone?
I never thought about that.
Well, it's kind of a darker chapter in Pompeii's story. Some people did return.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hoping to salvage belongings or, search for loved ones.
That makes sense.
But others saw it as an opportunity
To loot.
To profit from the tragedy.
So even in the midst of all that loss, there was still this human greed.
Sadly, yes. And that looting and salvage, it went on for centuries.
Wow. So even when they started doing official excavations.
It was still about extracting valuables, not really studying the site carefully.
So we might have lost so much information because of that.
It's possible. But thankfully, in more recent times, the approach has changed. Yeah, now archaeologists are focused on understanding the site as a whole, not just, taking the treasures.
Which is why we're still making these amazing discoveries today, like those slave rooms and the chariots.
Exactly. Every new discovery gives us this deeper understanding of the people who lived and died there, their hopes, their dreams.
Their struggles.
And Elodie reminds us that these aren't just ancient stories, they're human stories. And they're still relevant to us today.
Yeah. Pompeii gives us this unique opportunity to connect with the past on this really personal level.
We see ourselves reflected in the lives of those who came before us.
It's amazing how real Pompeii feels after all this.
Yeah.
Talking about it. I mean,
I know. It's like they're right there with us, you know? Like we could just walk down the street and bump into them.
and Elodie's work, the way she brings those people to life through her writing, it's like she takes a, slave room or a chariot or even just a piece of graffiti and she turns it into this human story.
It's like she's giving a voice to the voiceless, the people who history forgot.
Exactly. And it makes you realize that, our view of the past, it can be so distorted. We think about ancient Rome and we think emperors and, you know, gladiators.
The Colosseum.
Yeah. But Pompeii, it shows us a different side. This much more complex and human side.
It reminds us that history is about people.
Real
They're
people.
going about their lives, experiencing these events. And even though Roman society was, so different from ours in so many ways,
In some way.
we still see those same fundamental human experiences.
That desire for connection.
The struggle for survival.
The search for meaning.
It's all there, frozen in time. And it's like this window into who we are as humans.
It's beautiful. And, speaking of windows into the past,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really intrigued by Elodie's decision to focus her new book on the aftermath of the eruption.
The Temple of Fortuna.
Yeah. It's such a different approach. Most stories about Pompeii, they focus on, the disaster
The
itself.
big boom.
Exactly. But Ola, she's interested in what happened next.
Yeah.
How do people recover from a loss like that? How do you find the strength to rebuild your life?
And the title itself, the Temple of Fortuna, it makes you think about the role of, faith
Yeah.
in all of this. Maybe the Romans, they turned to the goddess Fortuna for comfort and hope in the face of such tragedy.
It makes sense. And it makes you wonder, how this event shaped Roman society as a whole. Did it change their beliefs, their laws?
Their art.
These are big questions.
Big questions. And I'm really curious to see how Elodie tackles them in her book.
Me too. I think it's going to give us a whole new perspective on Pompeii and its legacy. It's not just about destruction. It's about survival and adaptation and the power of the human spirit to persevere.
Even in the darkest of times.
Pompeii is this powerful reminder of that. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've seen how Pompeii gives us this glimpse into the lives of these ordinary Romans, the people who are often forgotten by history.
The everyday people.
Yeah, but it makes you think about our own time. What will future archaeologists find when they dig up our cities,
What will our trash tell them?
our buildings?
Our digital footprints.
What story will they tell about who we were and what we valued?
Will they see us as a society obsessed with, consumption and technology? Or will they see our compassion, our creativity, our search for meaning?
It really makes you think about the legacy we're leaving behind. We're all part of that archaeological record of the future. What will our story be?
That's something to think about. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of Pompeii.
And to our listeners, thank you for diving deep with us. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration into, the worlds of history and science and culture. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop digging deeper.